It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Wednesday, December 25th and Thursday, December 26th. Your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that says this is the most wonderful time of year for sure. World Juniors is here.
Love it.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. I've been podcasting about the Flyers, the NHL, and hockey for a decade. I'm here with prospect expert and Flyers credentialed reporter for 19 years, Russ Cohen. You can keep this season going with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $250 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And to keep up with the latest Flyers information and our episodes, you can find us at Locked On Flyers on all your favorite socials, including Blue Sky. And of course, here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's a little bit of an extra large episode today since it covers 2 days on the calendar for Christmas and Boxing Day, as some would call it in some parts of the world.
Yeah, Boxing Day's fun. I did
Yeah.
celebrate it once in Christmas in Canada. I was in Vancouver for the whole World Juniors back in '05, and it was fun. It was fun to go out to a store on Boxing Day. It was cool.
Yeah. And with World Juniors starting, of course, we have so much to talk about and give it the time it deserves. So let's dive right in, shall we? We have 5 Flyers prospects involved in the World Junior Championship this year. And I think, with each of them, there are different goals and expectations we're talking about here. Of course, Jett Luchanko, who is one of only 2 players on Team Canada with NHL experience on the team. And I think, for me, he is definitely a depth forward on this squad, which is such a powerhouse. Like, I think in other years he have been a 2C, but right now he's like a 3C, maybe 4C, depending on the situation here, given his two-way game as opposed to him being a purely offensive center, right?
Yeah, I think we'll probably see him 3C, but he has a great tournament. He could move up to 2C. I mean, it is a possibility, but it's a
Right.
little remote. It's a little remote.
Yeah, and we talked about him recently related to his junior team, the Guelph Storm in the OHL. They had a big trade that kind of weakened Guelph.
Yeah.
And so we were talking about our concern for his development, but him being on Team Canada is always a boost.
Oh yeah, it's going to be great for him. It's great experience. It will definitely put a pep in his step when he goes back, and then we hope he gets traded.
Yes, exactly, because we need him playing for a contending team so that
Yeah,
he's being pushed to play at a higher level. Again, with him getting 4 NHL games this season, he is going to be working toward coming back to the Flyers as quickly as possible because he already got a taste. World Junior is going to be a huge part of that. And yeah, I hope he's the kind of the solid 3C with a chance to move up to 2C in this tournament. I think it'll depend on if he gets some points on the board. Again, even though he's not like the big goal scorer on that team, that will determine whether or not he can move up in later games in the tournament.
yeah, I agree.
All right, Carson Bjarnason is one of the 3 goaltenders on Team Canada. His main competition right now is Carter George
Yeah,
for the number 1 spot. And it seems like based on the pre-tournament games, they're going with George here because George played in both games, and then each of the other 2 goaltenders had some playing time in those 2 warm-up games, and so I'm just hoping that Bjarnason can prove himself to maybe steal a game here and take over that number 1 spot. But it is really interesting because obviously Bjarnason's a huge guy, right?
yeah, yeah,
And so he takes up a lot of space. But Carter George is a quicker moving guy. And they
yep.
may think based on the speed of this tournament, they need a goaltender like that. But what's the argument maybe for Bjarnason?
The argument is really just what you said. That he has no chance of being the starter out of the gate. His only chance is that George stumbles a little bit, even in a win, and he gets in and he plays better. But it's hard to do that. Now with Canada, yes, it has happened, but it's,
They panic quickly. That's
yeah,
the
they
only
do.
thing.
They do, but I don't expect it to happen. I think George is good enough, and I think he'll. Last year he had a 9.15 in this tournament. No, actually in the U18, sorry, and he was terrific in that. If he's got something like that going in this one, they're not going to move him. If he stumbles, then sure, but that's can't believe that's going to happen.
Yeah, I think Bjarnason may get a start against one of the weaker teams
Yeah, no, he will.
in the group. So hopefully we'll get a good chance to see him in action and see how he does.
If they
And
play
maybe
Slovakia, he'll get a start.
right. And then Oliver Bonk is the third Team Canada Flyers prospect. And right now, it's really interesting to me because we know Bonk is, he can be an offensive threat, but he doesn't always do that. He's more of a conservative defenseman, but not a defensive defenseman, if that makes sense. He's more of a like stop him in the neutral zone kind of, but then also push forward kind of guy. And the fact that Sam Dickinson is on his team regularly, but for now, based on the preliminary games, they seem to have split those guys up in pairs.
And that's what I would expect. I think that's what's going to happen. And Dickinson's their everything guy. So, I think Bonk will be on the second pair until something happens or he could work his way up. But yeah, it's Dickinson's show.
Oh, absolutely. Interestingly, he has been Bonk has been paired with Matthew Schaefer in the pre-tournament games, who's somebody we're going to talk about in the draft eligible prospects section of the show, which we're going to do next. But I think that pairing should be very dynamic for Canada, and this is where Bonk becomes the more stay-at-home defenseman.
He has to be because Schaefer's offensive to begin with, and he's young, and so Bonk's going to have to watch out for him. So Bonk's the stay-at-home guy for sure.
Yeah. So
you got to play a role when you play for your country.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the way it goes.
Exactly. So a slightly different role than maybe he's working toward with the Flyers, but an important role for this Team Canada.
Yes.
Nonetheless.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
All right. We have two other guys in the tournament playing for not Canada. And the first is Jack Berglund for Team Sweden. So through the magic of time travel, we learned after we recorded our World Junior preview that Jack Berglund's injury was going to keep him out of the tournament, which is a real bummer. So we wanted to do this little insert while still keeping the content we recorded about him in the show after this little insert, just so you know what we had to say about him in general, because he's doing really well.
Yeah, he's a good player. These things happen. Somebody else could get hurt before we air the other. But yes, it's one of those things, and maybe they'll pick up like Anton Frondell or Simon Zether. They've got a lot of players to choose from, but it stinks for him. But you want him to be able to finish his season. That's actually more important.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of his development, but again, it's a bummer. We'll still see what happens with Sweden, which we talk about later in the show. And now back to your regularly scheduled content about Jack Berglund. We'll do that right now. He was the 3C in their first pre-tournament game against Canada. I'm a little questioning in terms of where he'll end up in the lineup, but we know Jack Berglund is more of a defensive forward. And so, he's not out there to score a lot of goals. I think when they're playing more of a powerhouse team like Canada, they're going to need him further up in the lineup to get those good matchups, right?
Yeah, it'll be 3 or 4C for him for sure. He's not going to be in the top 6.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I mean, ultimately that's his role in life. So if he gets to play that role and does well against his age group, fine by me.
Yeah, I think so. And, given the fact that he has been sort of going back and forth between the U20 league and the SHL pretty seamlessly, like they haven't, it's not a bad thing. It's just they're giving him more games, right? You'll see in his game
he's playing a lot of games. That's what you want.
A lot.
He's skating a lot. I think his skating has gotten better. He's physical. He wins faceoffs. Like that's the kind of guy he is. He can bring some offense, but he's not a big offensive guy, and that's okay.
Right, and it shows, right? In the U20 league in Sweden, he's got 15 points in 11 games, 8 goals and
Right.
7 assists. You move him up to the big boy club in the SHL in 17 games. So he's played more games at the SHL level, but he's got a goal and 2 assists in
Right.
those 17
But
games.
he
And that
does
just shows
other
the
things
level of
well
play.
there, and that could
Yep.
keep him in that league. And so, yes, and that would happen with the Flyers too. Like eventually, some year when he's
Yeah.
up there, they'll have, let's say, Luchanko's there, and you have a couple other centers. We'll assume Frost will still be there, even though we all know he'll be traded by then. But at that point, I had to say it. Sorry, but
I know.
at that point, at least like this is his role. Like he's good at this. Nothing to
Yep.
worry about. No transition.
Our last Flyers prospect in the tournament is Heikki Ruohonen on Team Finland, and he is one of the more fun draft picks we had and was a great addition to camp this past year. I think he, has flashes of excellent like forechecking and strong play. In this tournament with this strong a team for Finland, he'll probably be a fourth liner here,
Yeah.
given how young he is. But we know he's a Harvard commit for 26, 27. Like this is a long-term project with this kid. Right now, he's in Dubuque in the USHL. And so he's really adjusting to the North American game. And this is where I think, even though he plays for Finland, but him playing in North America will help him in this tournament.
Yeah, I mean the Halchinens, the obviously Constantinius, this is his team.
Yeah.
Neil Hemming, guys like that. Those are
All
the
those top guys, right?
Ruohonen. Yeah, those are your top guys. Nurmi, those are your big guys, and so he is just going to hope to add some offense, even if it's on the fourth line, because he's capable of some offense, and then maybe
Yep.
at some point he moves up to the third line. That's possible.
Yeah, right now he's got 12 points in 19 games in the USHL, which is pretty solid.
No, that's good. And I
Yeah.
saw him early in the year, and he looked fine. He's one of those guys that just can surprise you in a game, but his development's good. It's going.
Slow and steady, and that's
Yeah,
what we like with
yeah,
a guy like that. That's a depth pick in the draft. But
yep.
yeah, I think there are some strong but not overwhelming expectations for the Flyers prospects, which is really good, honestly. I think it's a perfect placement for all these guys.
I mean, chances are one of their prospects will experience gold. Chances are.
Yep. Yep, given the distribution here. So, no Team USA, so that's the one
Maybe
possible
that's a
exception,
precursor. Maybe it's not.
maybe. So, meanwhile, there are tons of draft eligible and maybe some overagers in this year's World Junior Tournament, and we're gonna talk about them and the draft prospects coming up next. Some of the best events of the year take place in and around the holidays, and sharing them with friends and family makes the perfect gift. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. And Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only those incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. My favorite part of the Game Time app is that it's great for getting notified about last minute flash deals and their super deals so you know that you're getting the best bang for your buck. Best of all, they have all in pricing, so there's no surprise fees at checkout when you activate the feature. Also, your tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through email. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem with the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. So on our Friday show, we're going to check in on World Juniors so far. Plus, we're going to start previewing the Flyers games coming back on that big West Coast road trip, starting with the Anaheim Ducks. Should be an interesting one with all
Oh
the
yeah.
soap opera drama of it all with Cutter Gauthier. So looking at the draft eligible prospects in the World Junior Championship, we have already started our draft coverage. And so we're going to quickly talk about three of the guys we've already talked about on the show and point you in the right direction for more. But James Hagens was the first prospect we talked about this year on October 24th in our prospect profile. And he's eligible this year. He's a Boston College guy. And so far, 20 points in 16 games, not too shabby, is going to be the star for Team USA, right?
Yeah, and one of the stars in the tournament. He'll be in the top 3 in scoring. I'm sure of that. If he were 6'2", nobody would ever utter a word of him maybe not being the first overall. But again, like I've said before, he's gone at the tournaments, been the best guy in the tournament. If he goes into this tournament and he's the best guy in the tournament, wouldn't shock me at all. He's that dynamic. And to do what he's doing in college is incredible.
100%. Porter Martone, we talked about on November 21st. He's a forward for Brampton in the OHL. And I really like this kid a
Oh,
lot.
yeah.
And right now, in 26 games, he's got 54 points, 21 goals, 33 assists. Like, how? That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, he can impose his will, and he's a guy to cover. He's a bigger guy. So that's a thing, but he is prone to turnovers. So this is like, if you're a US team, you're basically, you're going up against him, you're trying to get him to turn over the puck. So that's one of his weaknesses. It's not like he does it all the time, but he can do it. And so, but yes, I mean, the size is hard to handle. That's why the US is going to have like their big defenseman against him.
Right. Luka Radivojevic for Sweden. We talked about him very recently on December 19th. He's a right-handed defenseman. He's a little smaller, but he is ranked late first round, early second round right now, and could
I
move
have him
up.
late first. I do. We'll see if that changes. This tournament's going to mean a lot to that.
Yeah, I think he has to really show that he can compete even given his size.
Yeah, I mean, look, he is spunky. I think he's got decent speed. His dad, Bronco, who played for the Flyers, is taller, so it's possible he could still grow. And I think you have to put that into the equation when you do draft him. The hockey sense is good. I think you got to see how he stacks up in this tournament. If he stacks up well in this tournament, then I think, he has a chance to go at the end of the first round. A lot of people will just poo-poo him based on size, though. That's just, how that is.
Yeah. Another Team Sweden guy, Victor Eklund, you wanted to talk about. He is, again, a little bit smaller, but he is ranked like about 6 to 15 in the first
Yeah.
round right now. And he had 6 points in 7 games in last year's U18 tournament. He was a huge standout in their pre-tournament game against Germany, had 2 goals in that one, and has been playing kind of U20 and also the second tier league in Sweden. And for a younger guy, like, that's a huge deal.
Yeah, I've been watching him for 2 years now. He's got good numbers. I think he could be better than William. And he is
Mm.
a guy that you don't remember. William's doing really good this year.
Yeah, yeah.
But remember, he's a guy that you forget about his size. He could score, he could play make, he could do both. He's a very dangerous offensive player. Probably will be in the top 10 in scoring, maybe even the top 5.
And another guy you really wanted to talk about was Matthew Schaefer,
Yeah.
who is on Team Canada, but plays in the OHL for Erie right now. 22 points in 17 games so far. Like, what stands out about Matthew Schaefer?
Yeah, he's a terrific skater. The offense stands out. I think he's a cool customer. He definitely has to get stronger, and there's other things. If Canada wins and he has a big tournament, you're going to see this push like, hey, he should go number 1 and not Hagens, and I'm not there. I think it's very easy in this day and age to be very safe. So if you want a safe pick in this draft, sure, then take Matthew Schaefer number 1. But if you want to take a little bit of risk, then you're probably still going to go with Hagens. But we'll see how this tournament goes. It's going to say a lot. But he's a very good defenseman. I don't know if he's dynamic offensively. We'll see, and that will say a lot. But he's excellent.
Yeah, I think Obviously it's a different scale with Oliver Bonk, but I just based on the scouting reports that I saw, there's a similarity there in terms of can be an offensive threat, but often chooses to be a little bit more of a two-way defenseman, depending on
Yeah,
the
and I think he's got just a
circumstances.
little bit more offense than Bonk does. I think he has that
Right.
already. But yeah, I think as far as the makeup, I think that's pretty accurate.
All right, and then on Team USA, we have Jack Murtaugh, who is a 6-foot forward, a Boston University commit, and he's ranked late first, early second round. And we bring him up again, some of these late first, early second round, just because of where the Flyers picks are. It's really important for us to be focusing on some of these guys. But what impresses you about Jack?
He's another cool customer. He gets in these games and he's a threat to score. He's a threat to make a big play. He's one of the top guys on the NTDP. A lot of people will say, well, that's not their best team. Okay, but he still is a pro one-timer. He plays over 16 minutes a game. His shots are accurate. So he's a good two-way guy too. So I think he's going to be a player in this tournament. And if he has a good tournament, he can move up the list. I did put up a profile on him on NHLDraftBuzz.com, so people could check that out. But he's just a guy that, as the game goes on, he gets better.
Yeah, I think he's really impressive to me. And I think, this year's crop of Team USA draft eligible prospects, I don't think, obviously you have James Hagens, but I think there's a lot of like late
Yeah.
first half of the second round
Hmm.
guys. Like they're all batched together, where some
Yeah.
years you have a few that are more highly ranked.
Yeah. William Moore
But
could move up. Murtaugh could move up.
mhm.
These are guys that could move up.
But I think that it goes to the Flyers' advantage in a
It
lot of
does
ways.
because they'll have two picks. Let's say they're not in the top 10, but let's say they got like 13 and 17. Well, that'd be the
Mhm.
range.
Right, exactly. So, I'm looking forward to seeing these guys play. Jamiro Raber, who plays for Team Switzerland in the tournament, although plays in Sweden right now in the league there. So it's a very interesting dynamic.
It is.
But playing, your junior levels in Sweden, it's a really strong system there. And so I think it does make a ton of sense if you want to be a top prospect, and he was not drafted in 2024. And there's a question like, could he get picked this year? He's a smaller forward that can play center, but doesn't necessarily. He's a playmaker. But why did you want to talk about him specifically?
Well, so two things. So yeah, in the big show for HV71, he's got 14 points in 25 games, which is excellent. He
Hmm.
was passed over, so this is a perfect time to draft him this year. I watched him 2 years ago. In this tournament, he'll play center. Uh, he's smaller, so you can't call him Nico Hischier, but if he had a Nico Hischier kind of tournament, I would not be shocked. I think he's sneaky good, and people are just starting to talk about him in the SHL. I've liked him for a couple of years. I did a preview on him on Full Press Hockey a couple of years ago. That's still out there. And yeah, he could be a playmaker. He's fast. He's tricky. He is sneaky good. And he is a guy that has a high hockey IQ. He's pretty laid back. He always wants to be the best guy in his team. And he's still 18. So you draft this guy, you're getting a guy still with runway and developing in the SHL, and he could be a really good player.
Yeah, and I think that some of these overagers are always interesting in World Juniors
And he's
because
not even that much of an older ager, but he
no,
technically is.
no, just by 1 year. There's a couple of guys that are overagers by 2 years that
Right.
you wanted to bring up, and again, we're trying to give you a variety of country
Yeah.
teams as well here.
Yeah. We're
So
trying to
from
show different guys from different places.
Right. So on Team Slovakia, Sam Urban, who's a goaltender, he's currently playing in the USHL for Sioux City, which is like kind of a mid-division team right now. So like not
Yeah.
the greatest team, but not the worst team either. He was originally eligible in 2023 and is a commit to Arizona State. And I think this is a chance for him to show what he can do and maybe get that second chance with an NHL team.
Yeah, I mean, he's played like 58 games in the USHL. I think he plays bigger than he is. I think he's a smart goalie. Sometimes when they do play for these USHL teams, these guys are don't have the best defense in front of him or best team in front of him. So you can't always go by the stats. I think he's better than what the stats show, and I think he could frustrate some teams. So if they pull out a game or two because of him, I'm not going to be shocked. But he also could be that guy that faces 58, 60 shots and, gives up 3 goals and loses, and there's nothing you can do.
Right. And that's, there's pros and cons to being a goaltender for a weaker, and I say weaker, it's still top tier international hockey.
Right.
Like
Right.
Slovakia has a very good team.
Right.
But, in this
Compared to
tournament,
maybe the top 4 or 5. Yeah.
right. So, and he's 19 years old, and for a goaltender, you have so much runway ahead of you.
Yeah.
You say overager, but he's really only 19. So
Right.
there's a lot of room to grow here, and again, he could develop a lot further in the college game as well. Similarly, Adam Zidlicki from Team Czechia was not drafted in 2023. He's got an interesting backstory in that he played his youth hockey in New Jersey, and is currently in the OHL, played for what was Mississauga and is now Brampton
Right.
for the Steelheads. And so far in 27 games has 26 points. And obviously he's a little bit older in the OHL, so he's going to have like those kind of stats, given the physicality at that size, but also like this is a chance for him again to show out and maybe get another shot.
Yeah, I think he's having a really big developmental year. I think he's won some games in overtime. Like he could be, the dangerous scorer on the ice. He could be that guy that just is the glue. His dad played for the Devils, Marek Zidlicki. That's why the New Jersey thing. And if you remember, he was a pretty good defenseman. Well, his son's a pretty good offenseman. He doesn't play defense.
Yeah.
But I think there's something here, and I think he's going to be a guy in this tournament. He could score goals, and I think he's going to score some goals.
Yeah, I think so too. And there's some draft eligible prospects in the tournament that aren't eligible this year, but are going to be eligible in upcoming years. One of whom that has a lot of eyes on him right now is Gavin McKenna on
Yeah.
Team Canada. He literally just turned 17. He's already 6 feet tall. He scored twice in their pre-tournament game against Czechia. Right now, he is with the Medicine Hat Tigers in the WHL. We always love WHL kids on this show. And 30 games played, 60 points. I mean, my God.
Yeah, I think he's going to be better than a lot of the previous number 1 picks that have gone off the board the last few years. And James Hagens will be one of them. So if he's the top scorer in this tournament, it's not going to shock me, especially with the guys he's going to play with. Sometimes he looks like he's on jet fuel. He's got just amazing stick and puck control. He can make that great pass. He could get a sniper goal. He's that well-rounded, and it's hard to cover him. He's just a guy that you have to watch every second. So he's one of the most dangerous guys, if not the most dangerous guy in this tournament.
Yeah, could be. He's definitely one of the guys that could be the tournament MVP when all is said and done. I think even at a younger age of
Doesn't matter.
17. Right.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of the younger age, on Latvia, Roberts Naudins, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, but could be Naudins, but he is not eligible until 2027. He is just turning 16 years old. He's been playing in Switzerland, but transferred to Shattuck for high school, which is always a good sign for a future potential star in the NHL, right? Come over to North America, play for a prep school like Shattuck.
Play for Shattuck, and somehow Ted Donato reaches out and gets him. Like Ted Donato may be like one of the top 5 recruiters in college sports, period.
Right.
The guys that he's able to get sometimes, and I don't know this guy well. I want to see him in this tournament. I don't have any kind of big scouting on him, but he's taking all the right steps. So he's a guy to watch.
And I know things could change with a kid this young, but he's already committed to Harvard, which of course, like why not, given this situation. But I think that's a really good reason to keep an eye on Team Latvia in this tournament.
I agree.
All right. So those are just some of the incredible prospects you can see in the World Junior Tournament. Now we gotta, lay it all down and talk about predictions in the tournament. Plus, we have a few mailbag questions for y'all from this week's Flyers action. We're going to get to all of that coming up next.
The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. Not only can you bet on who will win the football game, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score, and so much more. For NHL picks, there are so many options like first goal scored, player shots on goal thresholds, over under on total goals, and more. This week, just whatever the over is for the Buffalo Bills as far as points, or anybody on that team scoring touchdowns, just take them over the Jets. It's pretty much a slam dunk. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
So, Russ, when it comes to the potential group winners and medal winners for this year's World Junior Tournament, one of the more interesting things is that Canada and USA are in the same group. They're in
Yeah.
Group A, which is always a wild ride because I think the way it feels to me is that whoever wins the preliminary round game loses the medal round game between these two teams.
Yeah, it's one of them is going to win gold. Probably one will end up winning bronze. Like that's usually what happens. And the New Year's Eve game is very important. I'll be staying in. I've told tales about that, and I will watch that game. I think Canada is the best team. McKenna might be the best player. Carter George may not be the best goalie, but he's very good. Their defense is just stacked. I mean, and it's got every aspect that you want to have covered. I think the U.S. team, Trey Augustine, terrific. Their defense, I don't know if it's as good as it's been now. I think G. Bouillon is just dynamic. And we don't have to go into, I can go into a half-hour show about him, but Flyers fans will get upset. So we won't do that. But I think he could be dynamic. And I think the rest of their defense is very good, but I don't think it's as talented as Canada's. I can go 3-4 deep with really super talented guys on Canada. I can maybe go 3 on the U.S., and I might be stretching it. So I think that's a thing this year that's a little bit of a sore spot, or a weak spot, I should say. Ryan Leonard returning is massive because he is going to be a beast out there, and so he will probably change some of the course of some of the games himself with his physicality and the way he gets to the net. So I think those are the two top teams, but based on the way things are shaking out, as far as where they are, it's hard, So I think, could they show up for the gold medal game and it goes 1-2? It could, but I think Canada is going to win, and then I'm going to go Sweden second just because of the way things are sort of shook out here. Everybody wants the USA-Canada gold medal game. I don't know if it's going to
be harder to happen.
It's harder now.
Again, given the groups, right?
Yes.
Because the other teams in Group A are Finland, Germany, and Latvia. Finland could play above their weight, but
they could
not. But it's slightly less likely than Sweden dominating Group B,
which they probably will.
They're with Czechia, who is strong but not as good as they've been in the past. Slovakia, Kazakhstan, who's going to battle relegation, and Switzerland in the tournament. And so when it all comes out in the wash, it just makes the most logical sense that Canada versus Sweden will end up being that gold medal game, right?
Yeah, and Sweden's loaded with talent. I mean, they really are, and there's big names. I mean, look, a guy like Konsta Helenius could change some games, and we know the Finns, when they play this death grip of defense and don't make a mistake, can upset a team, but I just don't see it for this one.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. That's the only kind of wild card here is, will Finland upset the USA?
Right.
And I think that's kind of the only question mark here. So we'll see if it plays out.
This is a weird tournament. One injury, one loss you don't expect. It's very cutthroat, and you never know what's going to happen. It sounds very easy when we're talking about it. It's not.
No, it is not. And of course, I think for Flyers player development, I want Canada to win just so that they're happy and they gain confidence from the tournament.
Well, from a prospect standpoint, I don't care who wins. From a national standpoint, I'd like the US to win. Of course I would.
Well, yes, emotionally, I would like the US to win,
Right.
but for Flyers prospect development, I would like the
I get it.
Canadians to win. So my heart is torn in this year's tournament. Normally, I'd be 100% Team USA.
I get it.
All right, we have a few mailbag questions for this week, and I had to put some of these in because they're really good and really important. We had so many comments saying something along the lines of free Fedotov, and we've been talking about it, that why aren't they
I
letting him
get it.
play? It is an important question that y'all are asking.
It is. It really is. It's inherently unfair right now. He's getting paid at the NHL level, so that part's great for him and his family, but he wants to play.
Yeah. Yeah. And stranger things have happened, but the way John Tortorella is talking, it seems like he's just going to stick with Urson
Unless
and
there's an injury.
Kolosov for now. Yeah. Yeah. And, when we saw Kolosov and Fedotov trading off games, I think they pushed each other
They
too. And I
did. I
think,
don't think there was a great difference. Like it was so cut
yeah,
and dry. Yeah, I could say Kolosov was a little better, but that's it. He was a little better.
yeah. And there was definitely room for Fedotov to improve. Like we
He
saw
was
him
improving.
steadily improving
He was
until he
improving.
kind of got cut off at the knees in terms of
Right.
playing time. So
Right.
I think, you can't do that to a goaltender, especially.
I mean, how many days has it been? It's probably been like 15 days since he's seen his
Oh,
start.
something along those lines.
Remember,
Joseph,
we used to complain about well, not on this show, but Anthony Stellaris was on, up with the
mm,
team and not playing for a long stretch once upon a time.
yeah, yeah. Anthony Stellaris and Alex Lyon are the ones that got away for me
Yep.
in a lot of ways. Joseph DeAngelis asked a really good question when we were talking about getting a shooting coach, right? Especially
Yes.
around Joel Farabee. In the past, we talked about this with Owen Tippett. So
Yep.
he asked, where do you draw the line between getting a shooting coach for experienced NHL forwards and just getting better players? At what point do we accept what Joel Farabee is, which is a good middling forward that gets to the right areas and relies on rebounds and tip-ins to score goals? Like, what's the difference here?
Well, I'll tell you what the difference is. I fall back onto, why did Claude Giroux go out and get his own shooting coach? Because he looked at the game and said, if I score more goals, I could have more impact on games. He got a shooting coach. He scored more goals. That same shooting coach has propelled some other players in this league to score more goals. That's why. You could say you have a skills coach and that's all well and good, but there are certain, people that are very good at what they do for certain things, and a shooting coach is a little bit specialized, but it's not like Comcast doesn't have money to spend on this.
Mm. That is an excellent point. And yeah, I agree. I think that we've seen what Joel Farabee can do in the past when he's on it.
Yeah.
And I think the potential is there so much that you don't want to give up on him at this
No.
point in this season. I think if you can get him off the schneid by helping him with additional coaching support, you should do it and then make a decision
Yeah,
in
I
the
think
off
they have 3
season.
more years of him on contract. So it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, you
Yeah.
you want him to get better in case you don't trade him.
Yeah. Carl Hamel is looking at the standings and the Flyers' recent performances and said the Flyers have now moved from the 20s in a draft slot to number 11 in less than 2 weeks. Just when I was about to go all in for Flyers making a playoff run, now I'm back to let's trade Risto and Frost for draft capital. Briere needs to start winning at trading. So, what do we think about where we are in the season now versus where they might end up, and what the management strategy should be?
Yeah, I mean, this is like a lottery to make the playoffs. You're one of like 5 teams fighting for that last playoff spot. That's what we're looking at. Seems like even Tampa is now moving so far ahead this early
Mhm.
on. They're up 6, 7 points on a team like the Flyers, that first wild card, forget it. So I look at it and I'm like, get in the top 10. To me, you need to be in the top 10 in this draft. And if you could do that, then that's gravy. As far as draft capital, I'm all for draft capital. I don't know if you're going to be able to trade Risto for draft capital right now, because with the rest of this season and another season at his salary, he's an okay defenseman. He's not great. He's not bad. He's okay. And so, like, based on the extra salary, I don't know if a team's really going to jump out at that. Frost, yeah, you could definitely get it. And you don't have to get draft capital for this year. You can get it for next year. So
Yeah.
that's really the thing. They loaded up for this year, so they really could get it for next year or even the year after. Talking about 2027 prospects. Well, now you can get a
Yeah.
2027 draft pick. It's fine.
Yeah, and I think obviously ideally in the 2026 draft, we're not looking at tanking for that. Like we should be
No.
beyond that at that point. So it's like this year you have to get the best picks you can possibly get and then have significant assets for the following year, but they don't necessarily have to have the same number that they do this year. But
Mhm.
who they end up trading will, I think, depend on how well those individual players perform. So,
Yeah.
Carl mentions Risto and Frost. I think the contract is prohibitive for Risto unless they retain salary.
Which I
And
think
I
they
think,
gotta stop doing, honestly.
yeah, yeah, we're done. Like we're just getting money off the books like for next year that we desperately needed. And with the huge increase in the salary cap for next year, I think there is the potential to get one pretty decent free agent out
Right, and
there in
remember
this
the
offseason.
Johansson case is not settled. That still may cost the Flyers against the cap this year at some point.
Yeah, or I don't know if they could even push it to next year if the
I
case
don't think they
goes that
can.
long.
I don't think they can.
No.
I think at some point it's going to happen, maybe even in the next month. I mean, you can only push it off for so long. I think there's gonna be some sort of issue there. So I think it's gonna come to a head, and they'll either win or they'll come up with a settlement. But that'll affect this year's, and that's why you just have to stop with all the extra money. Just stop with
Yeah.
that. It's not gonna benefit anything. Just because, again, even next year, even if you are a rebuilding team, I'm still not against them going out and getting somebody to play with Mitchkov. I think they might need to do that. They probably
Mm.
could have done it this year. They didn't do it this year. They should do it for next year, regardless of where they are in the standings. Doesn't matter.
Could be. Could be. All right. That will do it for our supersized episode today. I hope y'all had an excellent holiday
Yep.
and enjoyed the time. And we're looking forward to World Juniors. We're going to talk more about it after the first games are played on Friday, as well as Flyers versus Ducks and the big road trip expectations. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. So if you want your question answered on the show, like we did today, let us know via any of our socials at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail or comment on our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on Blue Sky and Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ at Sportsology on the same socials, SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen today. For your next listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And happy World Juniors, everybody.